Hello everybody, this is Con. Greetings from Canberra, Australia. The car you're looking at is a previous generation Subaru Impreza sedan that used to belong to my late uncle. Right now he's no longer around, but I've been driving this car for the past few days and thought I'd just make a video of it. Now, if you look at the front end of this car, okay, if this looks familiar to you, that's because this is the same face you see in a Subaru XV. So the XV, right, actually is essentially a crossover version of the Impreza. So if you see an Impreza hatchback in overseas market, right, it actually looks like an XV without all the rugged body claddings at the underside. So like you see this headlamp, for example, this is exactly the headlamp unit of the XV. Okay, so my uncle was a pensioner when he was alive, and he chose the lowest spec car available. So you have this car with halogen reflector headlamps, no fog lights. Yeah, there's a bit of a scratch here. No spot rim. No spot rim. Okay, and as you can see at the side, there's the indicators at the fender. No side mirror mounted indicators. Of course, no keyless entry. Get into the car the old-fashioned way. Oh, this is his door remote. Okay, so this is the proper key fob. Okay, proper key fob. Okay, now most of you would not be familiar with how the back of an Impreza sedan, but this is how it looks like. Okay, and you do get remote boot release. Okay, this is quite a big boot. As you can see, that is my GB pocket stroller. It's not folded to its most compact configuration. So as you can see, it's a rather big boot. Okay, very spacious boot. The seats, if you notice the line here, it has 60-40 split folding for you to extend the boot compartment. But it's a decently useful boot. And let's go inside. Right, so this is the rear section of the cabin. As you can see, my uncle chose his car with fabric beige color upholstery. These are the isofix mounts. So you get this little you can pull this flap down to access the isofix mounts inside here. But the Australian market really only recognized isofix fairly recently, even later than Malaysia, because for many years Australia has mandated the use of Australian local child seats. So this is one of it. This is a Britax unit lent to me by my uncle's nephew. Okay, as you notice, there is this top mount strap here, top tether strap, which admittedly it gives for perhaps a more safer protection, but it does make loading the baby into the child seat a little bit more troublesome. So just to give you a clearer look, this seat is belt installed. Okay, the belt, here's the third safety belt here for the middle passenger. So it's belt installed, safety belt goes in under here. Okay, and no rear con vents, just like the XV. So at the side here you see this is the one single bottle holder right there. And look at the lower section of the door. Okay, so you see this little hole here and this metal pin or what. Okay, so what happens is that this thing plays a very important role in a side collision. So in the case of you get T-bone, right? What happens is that if somebody bangs you from the side, that catches the door to prevent the door from going in, and this gives you extra side impact protection. Okay, the first time I saw this feature in a car was actually the Proton Satria Neo. Okay, the Satria Neo also had a similar thing like this at the lower side of its door to help catch the door in the event of a side collision, so that the door doesn't get pulled into the cabin and crush the occupants. Okay, so this seat here is a bit kacau, but as you can see here, okay, got good headroom up here, good headroom, and legroom is pretty fantastic, right? It's very spacious here, and I've got, well, fairly decent thigh support, so no complaints here in terms of space. And one thing you notice is, despite this being a base spec car, you have this is equipped with 6 airbags, okay, side airbag, curtain airbag. Alright, so those of you XV owners should find this to be very familiar surroundings. This is exactly the same dashboard as you would find in the XV, and so this is, once again, to reiterate, this is the base spec. And well, but you still get power windows, you still get electronic side mirror control, and you get headlamp adjustment, you get electronic stability control, which is standard in Australian market. There is auto start stop, okay, there's auto start stop, and there is a rheostat for the what you call that, for the instrument control, instrument cluster brightness. No keyless entry, you start the car the old-fashioned way. There's steering mounted controls, so you get audio controls, you even get cruise control. Okay, to start the car, you need to step on the clutch, twist the key in, start. Okay, so here is the instrument cluster, which has a very simple what you call it, monochrome central display that shows the trip meter, odometer, fuel gauge, and then the trip computer is on the top at the center here, which you press this button here to cycle through the displays, average fuel consumption and all that. So yep, at range, and yeah, average fuel consumption at 9.4 liters per 100 kilometer. So for a 2-liter engine, multi-point injection, pulling the weight of 4 wheels, pretty decent consumption. So very basic 2-din head unit here. You get auto climate control, okay, so you see you get single zone auto climate control. And check this out, a good old-fashioned 6-speed manual transmission. Okay, to engage reverse, what you do is you have to pull this ring up and it goes into reverse. Okay, otherwise you just shift through like this. One comment I have is that I quite like this gear change, but when shifting between 4th gear to 5th, the gate is actually spaced fairly close. Okay, so sometimes you may miss shift if you are not used to it. Well, otherwise the overall configuration of this cabin should be very familiar if you've come from an XV. Please excuse the mess. Okay, so underneath here, there's a 12-volt socket in there, and a USB port and an aux jack. Inside here, just a 12-volt socket, cup holder, coin holders, glove box. Yeah, so fairly basic, fairly basic, fairly simple cabin, but everything here is laid out with fantastic usable clarity. I can see why my uncle, who was, a simple man, pensioner, chose this car. Of course, the build quality is actually fairly fantastic. For a base model, you would not actually expect this area to be these plastics here are relatively soft touch. Okay, it is relatively soft touch, and as you move through the all these controls, the quality is very, very good. Okay, all this switch gear, fairly good quality. So overall, fairly well built, simple, no fuss interior. Now, as we all know, in the Malaysian market, manual transmission cars, the demand is extremely poor. Now, remember this story about the Toyota Corolla Altis of 2 model generations ago. The first time that Toyota called it the Corolla Altis. And I remember at that time, Toyota actually offered a manual version of that car. Okay, with the in conjunction with the base 1.6 liter variant, of course. And apparently, back then, okay, and this would have been more than a decade ago, that first generation Corolla Altis manual sold no more than 10 units in the whole country, in the model's entire what you call that, run in Malaysia. So quite simply put, the conclusion that we can draw is that where manual transmissions are concerned, the demand is already very poor, and if you are talking about C segment passenger cars, it is practically non-existent. Now, the Impreza being a C segment sedan, 2 liters, okay, if it comes into Malaysia, it goes against the likes of the Civic, the Altis, the Ford Focus, the Mazda 3, and all these guys. Okay, so manual transmission, not going to work. This kind of Kosong spec also, not going to work either. I mean, you're talking about a car, right, that will be priced minimum of 110, 120,000 ringgit. Do you think at that price range consumers are going to accept a car with steel wheels? You know, you can get away with halogen reflector headlamps like that, even so barely, but steel wheels, no can do, man, not in our market. But what I really admire about this, the way this car is spec'd, is that Subaru actually offers all the essentials as standard. So, you know, if you are buying your car, your Impreza or your Civic, or, you know, cars at this price range, you know, you buy the base model, right, you are already well sorted with, in terms of safety. You get ESC as standard, you get 6 airbags as standard. Amazingly, you get steering mounted controls and auto cruise as standard. So what are the items that you are made to pay for extra are really the non-essentials, like alloy wheels, higher grade headlamps, leather seats, all the non-essential stuff, really. So, but you see, the thing is that in Malaysia, this kind of product positioning does not work, because our cars are, you know, so expensive. And people have to fund their car purchases with 7-year loans, 9-year loans. You're not going to accept a base spec car for that kind of money. But whereas here in Australia, when my uncle bought this car, he bought it for less than 27,000 Aussie dollars. And if, let's say, like for somebody who earns a salary of 3,000 Aussie dollars, when you put it back into a Malaysian context, right, that person is buying a car with the budget of a Viva or an Iris. And when you're buying a car this size at that kind of budget, you can then tolerate a lot of missing items, because you're getting, you know, you're paying peanuts for your car. Now, on to the driving experience. So 2-liter 6-speed manual, all-wheel drive. This sounds like the recipe for a car that an enthusiast would really enjoy. And honestly, I must say, it has been a very enjoyable car to drive. I mean, what really stands out about this car is the amazing refinement of the 2-liter boxer powertrain. It is almost vibration free, and sometimes it is, you know, when the car is really nicely warmed up and it ticks over at idle below 1000 RPMs, right, the silence of that engine is borderline eerie. The way how quiet this engine is at idle when when the engine is warm. Of course, after following a cold start, when the engine is idling at above 1000, is a bit noisy. But when you're talking about warm idling, right, it is impressively quiet. Okay, and this engine has the engine comes with auto start stop. When this auto start stop is it's not exactly quiet. Okay, it's not exactly quiet. When the engine fast comes in and out of life, you really can hear it. But what is also amazing is how you don't really feel it, because the vibrations during the start-stop cycle is almost non-existent, and you get the feeling that it is not because Subaru damped the vibrations well. It is simply because the engine does not generate a lot of vibrations in the first place. The gear change is fairly good, right? The gates are pretty well defined in terms of their spacing, but the horizontal spacing between 4th and 5th is a little bit close. Sometimes when you're trying to shift from 4th to 5th, it feels as if as right you haven't moved much to the right, and then the gear already engaged into 5th. But actually, it is a very small physical gap between the gates of between the 3/4 plane and the 5/6 plane. Now the clutch is a little bit on the heavy side, but generally pretty okay to use on the move. It is only when taking off from standstill that the bite point can feel a little weak, but this could be a combination of, you know, the clutch aging and maybe perhaps in need of replacement, plus also the fact that compared to a front-wheel drive car, this is an all-wheel drive, and when you get going, the engine actually needs a bit more torque to pull the heavier drivetrain as well as to overcome the and to supply traction to all 4 wheels. So it requires a bit to start the car off from standstill. It requires a bit more torque than you would in a front-wheel drive car, and that is why when you take off from this car, you need to supply a bit more revs before you release the clutch. The handling is pretty fantastic actually, because firstly, the engine up front is a boxer, so it is low. The car center of gravity is low. It tracks fairly obediently around corners. Of course, because the engine is slung entirely ahead of the front axle, there is a bit of understeer, but if you use the sensible slow in, fast out motion and apply your throttle at the right point in time, this car just pulls you beautifully out of a corner. The primary ride is pretty okay, but secondary ride can be a bit busy, so maybe the tires are overinflated. I haven't had time to check this car thoroughly, but some of the rough edges of the road, you can really feel it. But when you go over bumps, you go over potholes, the suspension actually soaks up the surface pretty well. So it is not a brittle ride by any stretch of the imagination, but it does get busy at times. Concluding remarks of this car, I rather like it. It is back to basics motoring. It is no frills. It is not going to work in Malaysia, okay? But I like this car. I mean, we know Subaru cars are well engineered. They drive very, very well. And this is a proper full-sized C-segment sedan, okay, that drives well. And we know Subaru has a fantastic track record of reliability. Something like the Mazda 2 core spec that I reviewed earlier. This is a car that is low on all the bells and whistles, but you still get underneath it, you still get grade A engineering, you still get top-notch hardware. I mean, yes, you have to make do. You get ugly headlights, you get steel wheels, you miss out on keyless entry, but you get a boxer engine up front, you get all-wheel drive, so you know, you get a nice, beautiful to operate 6-speed manual transmission. So yeah, this car in this shape in Malaysia, not going to work. But I do have a question for you, the viewers. What do you think? Would you, if Subaru were to offer an Impreza sedan in Malaysia, okay, let's say it's fully spec lah, the top spec model, 2.0 CVT, all-wheel drive. There may be because it is all-wheel drive, it will be priced higher than a Honda Civic, or even if it's locally assembled. Okay, this is just wishful thinking lah, nothing official. But think about it. Would you consider a C-segment sedan with all-wheel drive? That is a question that I would like to ask you, the viewers, to answer in the comment section below. Yeah, so that concludes my video here in this Subaru Impreza that belonged to my late uncle, who passed away under quite unfortunate circumstances last month. But well, he's now, I hope he's now at peace and reunited with my auntie up there. He was a great man, and he really loved his wife. And in fact, he actually left his final wish was that, you know, he be buried next to his wife, and that his tombstone read, you know, reunited with his beloved wife. Yeah, so it's a big loss. It was a passing that really caught me and my family totally out of the blue. Yeah. So yeah, until my next video, thanks for watching, guys. Bye for now.